Hello, everyone, and welcome to my complete Whizbang Workshop card review, or at least the beginnings of it. We're going to be going through all of the cards and classes, though it will be class by class, bit by bit, starting alphabetically. Overall, I just want to give a general impression of Whizbang's Workshop. I think there's a lot of really, really cool stuff in here that specifically, is calling out nostalgic for the history of Hearthstone. Lots of callbacks to iconic cards and just overall, even like moments in time and community interactions, which I really, really enjoy. As someone who has been playing Hearthstone since the dawn of time, it's neat to see all of these homages to the cards and times that I have lived through and enjoyed, and others that I have enjoyed less. Um, but we're going to be starting with a class that has not existed for most of Hearthstone's history, but it is here now, and it is Death Knight. So, our first card here, Amateur Puppeteer. So this is a 5-cost Blood Unholy, Undead, with Miniaturize and Taunt. The new mechanic, Miniaturize, this is one of the new mechanics for the set. Miniaturize specifically is when you play this, you get a 1/1 copy of the card in your hand as well. So Miniaturized, I think, is a really cool mechanic in terms of both the sort of implications that it has for the variety of cards that it is like stapled to, right? Like this being a card that gives you a miniaturized version. That miniaturized version also has Death Threat. Will give your undead +2/+2. So this card and the miniaturized copy as well, ultimately gives a +4/+4 buff to your hand, which is very, very powerful. I'm someone who loves hand buff style strategies because I love building up to powerful things, and I love minions that get big. Um, but I think that a lot of these really need to be looked at in terms of like the whole package of what you get, right? Like this isn't just this. This is, kind of a 6-cost 3/7, obviously in 2 pieces. That gives undead +4/+4. So, when you look at it that way, or look at the fact that you can split it over turns, I think that this is a pretty powerful card. Obviously, it really depends on the various things that you have to synergize with this. I actually need to look at the core set, which I forgot to do a I forgot to do a full review of exactly everything that is coming in and out, but specifically, there are the like Nerubian Swarm Guard. I forget if that was a card that was from a set or core set. It's very complicated with Death Knight because Death Knight had so many cards that just came in at once. It's like which of these are core set cards, which of these are from what set. Kind of harder to remember. But this is a effect that works extremely powerfully with things like Gnome Muncher, or like I said, Nerubian Swarm Guard. Anything that generates multiple bodies that those buffs can be spread across is extremely powerful with this sort of effect. Anything with Rush, anything with Taunt. This also, when it dies, if you don't play out the 1/1 alongside it, it will buff the second copy, right? So this is kind of giving you a 3/3 taunt as long as this dies first. So overall, I think this is a very interesting card that is likely to be a cornerstone of any kind of hand buff style Death Knight strategy. And if that is something that does see play, we are seeing at least some of the AoE silence effects that previously were kind of dominant against buff type strategies. There's no more Shard of the Naru. There's no more Smothering Starfish. So there's more opportunity, at least, for a deck built around buffing your hand and thus getting out a big board to be successful than there have been in the past. Next up, we have Darkthorn Quilter. Speaking of things that are powerful to buff, this is a 2/4 Undead Quillbore. The end of your turn, deal this minions attack randomly split among enemies. So I remember there being like the 2/4 beast that was just like death rattle, deal its damage, deal power to enemies. This is just every single turn. So we've come a long way in terms of the power of hand buff things. This is also something you can buff on board because it's not a battle cry effect or anything like that. But this I think is a very, very powerful card to buff. Using this alongside, say, like Blood Tap again. I have a little bit of confusion as to what cards are around. Also, I did just look, and Swarm Guard is in core, so Swarm Guard definitely works with that. Blood Tap also in core, so yes, it does work with Blood Tap. So, basically, I think an Unholy Blood hand buff style deck has a lot more potential than it ever has before between this and the previous card we just looked at, both in terms of being able to build up a board that is threatening. But this guy with the Starkthorn Quilter, this guy gives you the ability to mow down your opponent's board, just mow down your opponent. Imagine getting this buffed up to like 6, right? Every single turn, you're like blasting your opponent's board, blasting your opponent to death. The fact that it is a minion that can eat a buff and will also just kill your opponent with that buff the turn that you play it if they've wiped your board of other big minions is a really, really big deal for this kind of strategy, because frequently without charge minions, these kind of decks can struggle to beat heavy removal based strategies. But this is a way that you can just finish the game off, because, well, it's randomly split among enemies, not among enemy minions. So has the potential to be very, very powerful. Next up, Dr. Stitchenso. This guy's really interesting, and it's not entirely clear trying to read this what it does. So basically what this is a 6-cost minion. You discover, with Battlecry, discover 5, 3, and 1. No 2 involved. And it's Death Rattle, summon the 5, and then the 5 has Death Rattle, summon the 3. The 3 has Death Rattle, summon the 1. So it's basically like a big nesting doll of bodies, which is a very cool concept. Like you think of like the Abomination Stitcher that like falls apart and leaves behind other pieces, and that's basically exactly what this is. So this is a very very, very sticky minion. It's difficult for any kind of deck to really remove. And also, this is one card that will give you a bunch of corpses if you are playing, a deck that is particularly leaning on trying to generate enough of those. But this, is super, super strong with the amount of things that you can potentially sew into it as far as additional death rattles. Because each of these is a discover, right? It's not like random. You could potentially, have this 6 give you a 5 that also has another death rattle, and, just basically have like body parts falling out of body parts all the way down. So super interesting card for any kind of attrition-y game. Obviously, against an aggressive deck, this is going to be terrible, right? Like, this is a 6-cost 6/4 with no taunt or anything like that. So it's going to be very, very difficult for, anything to, this to really stop any sort of aggression from your opponent. I do think that it's interesting. Think about this with, like, Death Growl, right? Like, giving this Death Rattle to other things. I don't know, like, or like, using the say like Yelling Yodeler on this to get multiple instances of the Death Rattle, so you have multiple 5s that give you 3s and things like that. Definitely a very, very difficult thing to remove outside of your opponent renewing it or silencing it. So certainly a card that I think is very cool and likely to be pretty powerful. So next up, we have Rainbow Seamstress. So this is a 3-cost 3/3 Battlecry. If your deck started with a Blood, Frost, or Unholy card, gain Lifesteal, Reborn, or Rush, respectively. So crucially, this is not like a Reno effect where, like, if you've gone later in the game, it like goes backwards in terms of how powerful it is. It is started with these. So if you are playing a Rainbow DK, one of each rune, this is a 3/3 Lifesteal, Reborn, Rush. Notably, the Reborn will always just be a base 3/1. You don't get the other effects because they're part of the Battlecry rather than being sort of intrinsic in the minion. But this is, I mean, a powerful card, right? A 3/3 Lifesteal, Reborn, Rush for 3 is quite powerful. So this is an interesting way of like encouraging, a like rainbow style strategy without necessarily, requiring it. Like, you could very easily see this being like a Blood Unholy card with Lifesteal Rush, right? Like, we were just talking about the Blood Unholy, like, hand buff style deck, right? And because this isn't triple rune, you can still play this in that deck. And because you're playing hand buff stuff, you have a very powerful way to use a 3/3 Lifesteal Rush, for 3. That can very easily be Lifesteal Rush, say, 6/6. Right? So, like, while this could seem like, well, you might as well just make it Rainbow itself, the fact that it does have applications elsewhere, and I think the most powerful of them are Lifesteal Rush, the Reborn is kind of meh because, again, you're just getting back the 3/1 body, but when you have the opportunity to get that, especially if your deck cares about corpses, it does matter. But definitely a very interesting card that I do expect to see play. Next up, we have Rambunctious Stuffy. So this is a 3-cost 4/2 with Rush after you cast a Frost spell, gain Reborn. So interestingly, the way that this works is each iteration, right? Like you can play this, cast a Frost spell, it'll get Reborn. You attack, you can cast another Frost spell, give it Reborn, attack, cast another Frost spell, give it Reborn, attack. And there are a lot of like cheap Frost spells, like Horn of Winter, for instance, that you can use to continue to give this thing Reborn, and it does baseline have Rush. So you can keep attacking with it in a single turn as long as you can keep casting Frost spells and giving it Reborn. So I think that on the surface, you look at this, you're like, that's not that good. But when you consider like the implications of playing a deck that has all these cheap Frost spells, which many Frost decks, will often have, this can be a very, very powerful effect. It is possible that Horn of Winter is rotating, but I believe, just looked at it, it is in the core set. So yeah, Horn of Winter is being added to the core set, so still available to horn out your rambunctious stuffy to clear your opponent's board. Next up, Shambling Zombie Tank, which is a kind of a funny name to begin with. But 2 cost, 3/2 taunt. With Battlecry, spend 5 corpses to summon a copy of this. So this is interesting, right? It's an undead mech, which if you're playing a deck that cares about like Menagerie style stuff, we are losing all the amalgams except for 1 amalgam gang. Specifically, the fact that we're losing Amalgam of the Deep makes the amalgam style strategies certainly much less appealing and more difficult to pull off. But if there's enough multi race, multi tribe, whatever you want to call them, cards, maybe you can still find use for, say, 1 amalgam band, which does remain in the format. But this, I think, is reasonable. The fact that this has is just baseline 2 cost 3/2 taunt. That's okay. It's not amazing, right? It's fine. But being able to get 2 of them later in the game, you can have the reasonable tempo option of just playing it on turn 2, as well as like, hey, I'm getting multiple bodies out of this in the later turns. I feel like there's probably better sort of things to be spending those on. But again, it is a copy, not like summon a 3/2. So this could be a card that you specifically want to play in like a hand buff style deck, right? If you're playing Blood Tap, if you're playing the miniaturized guy, you can end up getting later in the game, say you get 2 5/4s, 2 6/5s or whatever. Like that's really powerful, right? So I think that this is unlikely to see play in like normal sort of like decks that would be using the corpses for this, but much more likely to be a powerful effect in, say, a hand buff style deck, which there's a pretty solid amount of support for that we've seen so far in this expansion, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's something there. Next up, we have Silk Stitching, a 2-cost spell. Choose a friendly minion, discover a spell that costs 4 or less to cast when it dies. I assume this is actually giving a death rattle effect. So this is sort of like, like a Nerubian Vizier-ish effect, right? Because you're getting a discount, but it is a spell that you have to specifically want when the thing dies. So yeah, I don't know. This is a hard card to evaluate, right? Nerubian Vizier was great, but Nerubian Vizier also allowed you to like plan ahead and not necessarily have to, have a minion that has died to make it good. You don't necessarily have to have a minion on the board. And this is also kind of like telegraph to your opponent. I assume they know what it is. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just see spell will be cast. That I think does influence pretty substantially the power level of this card, if it's like face up to your opponent or not, so they know it's going to happen when it dies. But yeah, overall, I think this is unlikely to be a particularly competitive card. For exactly the reasons I'm describing. It's very, very situational, and like if you like discover minion, you discover like just removal, like that you don't want to be casting, or it's gonna random cast. It really sort of depends on what the sort of pool of spells is. Which again, so many of the Death Knight cards are like heavy removal based, and not being able to control when the thing necessarily when the thing will die, and also, what it will target, because the fact that it can trigger your opponent's turn clearly makes it something that's going to be a random effect. So it seems pretty unlikely overall to be that effective. You can, of course, always use it with your hero power, to just cast a spell that costs 4, you know. But again, like so much of that pool of spells is going to be like removal that you don't necessarily want to cast. So I'd be surprised if this is a card that sees a lot of play. And next up, we have Threads of Despair. One cost blood spell. Give all minions death rattle, deal 1 damage to all minions. This is basically like a defile that that like you can use on your hero power. Like you just hero power, Threads of Despair your 1/1, and then like attack it into a 2/2, and then everything just starts exploding. So yeah, this is very much a defile effect, right? Um, that is gonna. I mean, it's gonna blow up more than defile very frequently because if you have like a bunch of small things, they like all blow up bigger things rather than just like ticking and killing the next thing. But yeah, this I think is likely to be a very very powerful card for controlling decks against decks with small minions. Obviously, again, like the fact that you can just use this in your hero power means that like you don't even need a 1-cost minion in play, like you do with defile. You literally just like hit your 1/1 into their 2/2 as long as that can happen, um, unless there's like a taunt in the way kind of thing. Yeah, very very powerful card. Definitely expected to see significant play. And lastly, but certainly not least, the first Death Knight hero card, the Headless Horseman. So the 6 cost, it gives you 5 armor, pretty much like just about every hero card. Battle cry, destroy the enemy minion with the most attack. Shuffle my head into your deck. You must get it back. Which is hilarious that it actually, uses the Headless Horseman like rhyming cadence. Anyway, this is the head. Shuffle in your head. When drawn this casts, your enemy will cower. Imbue the souls of undead into your hero power. Here is the initial one, the Pulsing Pumpkins. Deal 3 damage with crushing brawn. My army shall be yours if my head is drawn. Pulsing Pumpkins. Deal 3 damage with crushing brawn. Discover an undead to serve as your pawn. Ha 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 ha. You have to actually laugh or else it doesn't have its effect. But yeah. So this is an interesting hero card, right? Because like you do get effectively destroy the biggest enemy minion as a battle cry. 5 armor, destroy the biggest enemy minion at 6. And then your hero power becomes deal 3 damage. And then if you can get through your deck and find the Horseman's Head, you now have a hero power that's deal 3 damage and discover an undead. So it's a like Galakron-ish, I just get to keep generating additional things effect. So this is, I think, like, pretty powerful, not like outrageously powerful, because if you're playing a deck that cares about your corpses, right? This can be problematic because you lose your hero power to generate corpses. Until, of course, you get the head back and can start summoning undead. But even then, you don't immediately get corpses. 3 damage is a lot for hero power, though. So just changing your hero power to deal 3 damage is a pretty major upgrade. There are, of course, ways to dig this out of your deck. There's like the Keen-Eyed Seeker that draws a card that didn't start in your deck, and of course, just basic card draw like to dig you through to it and everything. And 6 cost just that also kills your opponent's biggest thing as like a battle cry. Like that's not a major tempo loss, right? Like if your opponent is playing like a deck full of a bunch of like aggressive dudes, then sure, maybe this is bad. But we just saw there's a new defile for Death Knight that can very likely give you a lot of time to get you to stop, get you to this to buy time against aggressive decks, especially alongside again your early game hero power to help clear those sort of things. And in any kind of like controlling matchup, if your opponent isn't like OTKing you or have something that goes way way over the top, ultimately getting the head and having a hero power that not only does 3 damage but also discovers an undead every turn is just very very powerful. So I think this is quite good. I don't think it's like totally like, hey, this goes into every deck that can play it. But I think it is a definitely a very very attractive hero card for a lot of different decks. I think it'll go in almost every deck that can play it, but Certainly not like a really really like corpse hungry deck, for instance. Like you don't necessarily want this in your deck if you have like like Grime Walker, right? Like if you're playing a deck that is looking to build up a bunch of corpses like current Rainbow DK, and has like lots of ways to take advantage of the bodies and really use those with like the poisonous upgrade, things like that. Maybe that deck doesn't play it, right? But I think like the fact that it is Blood Unholy, and we were just talking about like the like hand buff style decks, that deck probably loves this because it gives you this sort of direct damage and interaction, along with the ability to generate more undead later on that you can then buff with your hand buff things once you've sort of run things out. So anyway, overall, very excited for it. Definitely love the fact that they managed to get the sort of rhyming cadence on each of the cards and still have it be clear what they all do. So anyway, that is Death Knight. So first hero card, a lot of cool things. I do feel like the strategy within Death Knight that feels like it is the most supported by this set of cards is like hand buff. And as someone who really enjoys that kind of strategy, that's certainly the Death Knight deck that I'm going to explore once you get an opportunity to play with the cards. All right, next up we have Demon Hunter. First card is boom, Ball Hog. 4-cost 3/3 with Lifesteal. Battlecry and Death Rattle deal 3 damage to the lowest health enemy. So this is a very interesting card, right? Because just like by itself, this is 4-cost 3/3, either like drain you, like life drinker you, or like kill a guy. It's just like a very like powerful, like mid-range-ish tool. I don't know if there's like other Death Rattle synergies that exist in Demon Hunt right now. This is an outrageously powerful arena card, right? And the fact that it's lowest health enemy like makes it so that it's mostly going to be predictable. But like, I don't know if this is good enough in the sort of environment that we live in now. But like it's just like such a powerful card against aggressive decks, right? Like against the deck that's trying to like like pressure you down, burn you down. This like is just like a huge insulation against their aggression. And if you're using your life total and resources in some capacity, like attacking to your opponent's minions, this is a great way to buffer that as well. So I think it's just a solid card. It's the sort of card that I'm excited to have the opportunity to play in something like Highlander Demon Hunter, where you really need that like additional life gain to keep you afloat when you're getting beat up and using your face to punch into things. So and also the fact that it just straight up has lifesteal and isn't just like each battle cry also gains you life, means that like if your opponent like doesn't kill it, they can't like they can't race it. So very powerful card against aggressive decks, that's for sure. Next up we have Blind Box. 2-cost, get 2 random demons, outcast, discover them instead. I assume that this is within your class. Like you can't get stuff from other classes, like because typically something that's random, right, would be from any class. But the fact that the outcast is discover, I would imagine that like you don't like have the opportunity to get warlock demons, and then when you discover, you can't. It seems like pretty medium. I feel like maybe if you're playing like big demons and you want like extra stuff to potentially use, maybe you're using this because it's like can give you extra demons to use with things like Allfelberg Sluice or whatever, especially now that Zilleg's gone and you want like extra bodies to potentially fill that role, but probably not going to see much play, frankly. Next up we have CCG. Get it? 4-cost 4/3. Death Rattle, get 3 random first edition Demon Hunter cards in mint condition. First of all, I love this. Like the whole concept of the card is hilarious to me. But what this actually does is give you gives you 3 random cards from the pre-nerf Demon Hunter. So this is like day 1 Demon Hunter. And yes, the name is literally CCG, collectible card game. So like this can give you like 0-cost Twin Slice. This can give you 5-cost Skull of Gul'dan, I think. This can give you, like I think like the 7/4 dude if you attack, deal 4 or deal whatever. There's a lot of just like this gives you nutty cards, right? Because all of the pre-nerf cards were nuts. I don't know if it's actually good because it's still a 4-cost 4/3 that you have to that like is Death Rattle get these effects, get these things, and it's random, so you don't necessarily know that you're getting that you're getting them, or like whether they're going to be an outcast position because it's 3 of them. This feels like it's maybe like a like value Highlander Demon Hunter card, but certainly not something that's going to see play in like a lot of more straightforward decks. All right, next up we have Lesser Opal Spellstone. Spellstones are back, in case you couldn't tell. So this is draw a card, attack with your hero 2 times to upgrade, into draw 2 cards, draw 3 cards for 2 mana, which is pretty powerful. This does have to be in your hand. This isn't like the Spellstones aren't like if you did this game. This requires the upgrade for this to be in your hand. There's a lot of card draw in Demon Hunter is the thing, right? So like having card draw that like needs to get like fueled up like this when you're probably going to be spending your mana on other things. I don't know how good this is, but card draw in general, especially relatively cheap card draw, is quite powerful. Demon Hunter is like kind of flooded with it. Maybe this goes into like just like spell Demon Hunter, right? Like I don't know what necessarily is still around for that. Actually, it might not. It might be rotating, right? Is the Scythe rotating? I forget if Scythe is rotating. I feel like it is. I forget what set that's in. But there are like some things that allow you to attack multiple turns, like multiple times a turn. I believe the Scythe's rotating. I believe like multi-strike's rotating. I think it's basically just going down swinging that will give you potentially multiple attacks in a single turn with this, which having all of that all sort of hitting at once, maybe that's not great, but it is a relatively, again, like relatively cheap spell that does offer even just 2 mana draw a card. Is not like horrible. It's not good. But it's not like the fail case for a card like this is good enough that like it can be worth running, even if it's not necessarily like super easy to get it fully upgraded. So, but again, did mention big demons. Here's a big demon, Magtheridon Unreleased. Kind of funny that it's unreleased. Like, why isn't it just like Magtheridon Chained, Magtheridon Trapped, Magtheridon Unreleased? Just feels like a weird card, a weird name. But anyway, 8 cost 12/12, dormant for 2 turns. While dormant, deals 3 damage to all enemies at the end of your turns. I guess it's like a unreleased, as in like this never got released. Like it's a playtest version. I don't know. But this is a cool card. Like it being a giant minion that like is multiple turn AoE, and it's all enemies, right? Not just all enemy minions. Is pretty sweet. It is very expensive, right? 8 is a lot of mana, but there are like discount things to get like big demons into play. This could very easily be like the big demon Hunter style decks. I forget if the 4-cost guy who reduces the cost of your next demon by 2 exists, or if that rotates. I believe that guy was in. Was that guy was a core set card, right? So I think it's still in. I think it's still around, because that was like in the original set and was just legal. So I think that you can get this guy into play, faster, pretty handily, and obviously, can be very powerful just being dormant, to clear out aggressive decks and tick some damage on your control opponents without them being able to interact with it. So all of that is pretty sweet. So certainly a interesting card. Not like a, hey, this ends the game in the spot type card like Illidari Inquisitor, but I definitely am more excited to play with a card like this than Illidari Inquisitor, because it's not just kill your opponent, it does cool things. And you can even use it with this red card. 1 cost, make a minion go dormant for 2 turns. So if you really want to, your Magtheridon pops back up, and you're like, no, foul on the play, corrupting the orc's blood, and then you red card it and make it go back dormant and start, blasting them again. But yeah, this card definitely a interesting tempo tool against big minions, especially. One of the things that's interesting, like just having a really, really cheap interactive card like this can be, very, very powerful. It's very powerful against obviously any kind of big thing. It's even reasonable against small things, right? Like we were talking earlier about, how Demon Hunter is very, very good at drawing cards cheaply, right? So having like using a card that just kind of delays one of your opponent's minions, even in the early game against like a relatively small minion to prevent damage, can be quite effective. Like I can certainly imagine, like I said, like a deck that's looking to build up to like big demons or whatever. It's just using cards like this to buy you time to get to those big demons, and then you get to turn the corner and use those. So and especially again, if you have other sort of synergistic uses like your own Magtheridon to to dormant that once again and keep the damage ticking, I think is a very interesting option there as well. So I think this is a better card than it appears. I think that you look at this and you're like, oh, this doesn't kill anything. This like trades 0 for 1 essentially, but buying time for cards in a class that is very good at drawing cards, and is getting a lot of other good card draws like the Spellstone in this set. I think it makes this a lot more powerful than it looks. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this sneakily end up seeing a good amount of play. Next up, Spirit of the Team, another callback to the Rastakhan Spirits. So a 2-cost 0/3 undead. Stealth for 1 turn. Your hero's +2 attack on your turn. So this is obviously just like 2-cost +2 attack, and then also +2 attack next turn. That obviously it's stealth, it could die, but reasonably likely you can expect for it to live. So this I think is like a pretty interesting card. Obviously, when you're playing stuff like this, if you're looking to play stuff like the Spellstone, having cards like this that give you attack for effectively 0 mana on the turn that you might want to use your Spellstone or whatever is quite nice. So if you just think about it in terms of like raw damage, right? Like this is 2 mana for 4 damage over 2 turns, and that is pretty good from like just a raw rate perspective, and obviously has again synergy with things that care about you attacking, which is a lot of Demon Hunter cards. So I do think this card seems pretty solid, and I would expect it to see a decent amount of play. Next up, Umpire's Grasp. Speaking of big demon cards. 3-cost weapon, 3/2, Death Rattle, draw a demon and reduce its cost by 2. So obviously a very, very valuable card for any kind of demon deck. Just a weapon that draws a card. Like this is obviously like not particularly efficient. A 3-cost 3/2, not great. But draw a card and reduce the cost by 2 on a demon. That's really powerful. Right, so like this drawing Magtheridon, this drawing, I think Illidari Inquisitor rotated, but this drawing like, the other giant dude, I forget the name of it, the 9-cost one, powerful, right? Even if you're just like playing this in like a mid-range sort of demon deck, I think almost all the vast majority of demon hunter things are bigger as far as the demons are concerned, which is mostly where you'll see this. But even just be able to draw something and like reduce cost to 0, also really powerful, right? So definitely a card that I think has a good amount of potential. Very, very likely to see play. Any sort of cost reduction and card draw are powerful. Any like cost reduction is powerful, card draw is powerful. This is cost reduction and card draw on one card that also allows you to fight for the board because of the weapon. So just definitely an overall very solid card. Next, Window Shopper. Hey, here's a demon. This is also a very good team to get reduced, right? This is a 5-cost 6/5 demon with Miniaturize. Battlecry, discover a demon, set its stats and cost to this demon's. So you could very easily imagine, coin out the 3/2 weapon, attack, then attack again, draw this, reduce to 3, play it, get a 3-cost 6/5 of whatever demon, and then have the 1/1 and get to like continue along like this. Maybe who knows, maybe you get a 1/1 Magtheridon and just get to nuke your opponent every single turn with your discount bargain basement Magtheridon. So I think this is just like a solid card. Obviously, like this is going to be in a very specific sort of deck that's looking to use like the previous weapon and things like that. But obviously, like in a like just straight up game, playing this, and getting okay, well now I have another 6/5 for 1, 6/5 for 5 is like meh. But you also get to play the 1 and then maybe get something else. So it really sort of depends on like the pool of demons that do exist. But it feels like there's enough demons that have like very powerful things that are detached from their own stats, like Magtherid in particular, that this can. And I wonder, actually, I'm curious now that I think about it. I imagine Window Shopper's miniaturized version is also named Window Shopper, so it probably can't discover another Window Shopper, right? Like you obviously can't discover the miniaturized version, but like, can the miniaturized version discover this? I don't think so, but I'm curious. Anyway, overall, like I said, powerful card in the right context, definitely has potential. Not the sort of card that I expect to just generally see play, but certainly the sort of thing that in a sort of like big demon-ish strategy is pretty exciting. And finally, our last Demon Hunter card, Workshop Mishap. 4 cost, deal 5 damage to a minion, excess damages both neighbors. The return of Meteor positioning. So yeah, Outcast gain lifesteal. So this is a like okay removal spell. Very good against aggressive decks. Super good like AOE if your opponent has a bunch of small minions. But certainly the sort of card where you're gonna feel really dumb playing against it a few times, where you accidentally don't have your big minion in the middle and you get your board wiped. Say you have like a 4/4 and 2/2/2s, right? If you have the 4/4 or 4/4 1/1 2/2, I don't know, or 2 4/4s and a 1/1, right? The 1/1 in the middle, this nukes your board. Otherwise, they have to like choose, you know. So again, it's Meteor positioning basically because Meteor always you want to have your biggest thing in the. You actually with Meteor you never wanted to have biggest thing in the middle because it was big damage to the middle. It's the opposite of Meteor positioning. I don't know. It's been a while since Meteor's been around. That's Ungora. That's like most of the past 10 years of Hearthstone. But yeah, overall, definitely especially if you can outcast it, quite a powerful card against aggressive decks. Sort of the sort of thing that, again, if I'm looking at playing like a more controlling Demon Hunter deck, whether it's like Big Demon Hunter or Highlander Demon Hunter, certainly the sort of card that I'm excited to see. So, very cool, and yeah, going to make people mad when they don't play around it. And that is Demon Hunter. As mentioned, I do feel like there's a lot of interesting tools for slower Demon Hunter decks. A lot of so much of Demon Hunter historically has been like very aggressive type strategies. Right now, there's not really very much that Demon Hunter has going on that isn't just rotating anyway, like the spell Demon Hunter. So I do feel like this is going to be a very different style of Demon Hunter, much more like mid-range or control oriented, are the sort of things that I see this set supporting. Ball Hog feels like a very good, sort of like mid-range anti-aggro tool, along with the Workshop Mishap. But I'm most excited about like the big demon stuff with like Umpire's Grasp, Window Shopper, and Magtheridon. So I definitely just want to somehow get like multiple dormant Magtheridons and just blow my opponent up with the passive damage every single turn. That's my goal with Demon Hunter this expansion. So let's see if we can do it.